Still have a few minutes before the official hour begins.
Everybody good?
Everybody good?
Praise the Lord.
I'm telling
Amen.
you.
I have a limb pressing against my back door, but other than that, ain't nothing a four-wheeler and a chain can't take care of.
We had like 5 billion little twigs and leaves all on our porch, but hey, I was.
Yeah, well, we got
And in
some
the
back
yard,
stuff. We got some back.
I picked that up in my leaves. Actually, I can make one too.
It was a nice little trial run for
Yeah.
generator.
Hey, it was so nice. It did, the power wasn't off. 12, 15 seconds, that generator kicked on. Oh, life was good.
Oh, you
much
got one
gas
of
did
the
it
Generacs, didn't
How much gas did it use?
When we went and looked
you? Oh, you all
after,
set up. Did you call me?
it showed that it had, still had 65%
Oh,
left in
how
it.
sweet.
And it ran.
Well, the power went out about 5:30 that morning. We didn't get it till when we were out of all that day and night until the next day about 11:30,
What size tank you got?
500.
Hey, Stephen.
So how much
Welcome.
gas was it?
Stephen, you
It
and
used
Martin
about
are online with us.
35% of the 500
And
gallons.
Mike and Buck are here in the courtroom. Jackie is here. Donise is here. Joe is here. And the Calhoun Media Group is here. I love saying that. And Lynette is here. And Kay will be joining us in just a minute. So we're almost ready to begin.
So who's all on the telephone is
Would be
Stephen?
Martin and Stephen. Okay, the hour has arrived. It is officially 10 a.m. according to Verizon time. We'll go ahead and call this 2021 budget workshop to order. Let the record reflect that this meeting has been duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act and has been posted, and that a quorum is present. We've now had the treasurer to join us. Welcome, treasurer. And it is the requirement of county government to make public comments available at the beginning of each of our, forum meetings. And so with that being said, we will ask the county clerk, have you had any petitioners
we have
request
not.
to make public comments? Okay. With that being said, then we will move on to the matters at hand. We have been delayed about a week, gentlemen, as we all know, we're interrupted, but we're certainly thankful that we have not had the interruption that Jasper County has had. And just by one tick of the movement, we are not in what would have been us, but for the fact that Jasper is having to experience that. So the EOC has been stood up. It was stood down yesterday afternoon at 5 o'clock, but Ken is still processing varieties of different issues and matters. So that brings us to our budget workshop. We are a little bit off compared to the schedule that we wanted to be on, that we were hopeful to buy at least a little bit of a window of time so that calculations can be provided for the tax assessor collector. But we are ready to move forward. We've had opportunity to hear from individuals, officials that wanted to speak to me directly, those that wanted to speak to the court directly, and now it's time for us to have a conversation among ourselves. I think one of the sobering things that I've come to realize and embrace is that this budget is actually owned by the court. It is driven by the court, it is funded by the court, and by a majority vote of the court, and that a majority of the court, then it is amended or adjusted. Hi, Terry. So with that being said, gentlemen, I would propose to us that a continuation of the timeline for our continuation of budget workshop and the proceedings that we will be doing to come up with a bottom line figure that we would take the same tax rate. Value goes up, then there's going to be a 10 increase and be a fair shake. With that is that it impacts us in its entirety. I'm on page 3 of 24 distinguishing between that. So thank you very much for this document. It's on page 3 of 24 where the Commissioners Court Appropriations. Let's just step back a moment and let's look at where we are general fund monies. That's any carryover that we may have, any ad valorem allocation, the half-cent sales tax that we would be creating, delinquent all the way down. So the cumulative total of that, I don't necessarily have as a total, as a total figure, but that's where our revenue stream comes from. And now Commissioners Court has a variety of line items that we fund. And it begins with the sheriff's sales tax and then goes down. I'm going to propose that we look at a reduction of this if we absolutely do not have a demand that we can be comfortable with. And I will lead off on the discussion just to solicit participation by those present on each of these line items. Obviously, the sheriff's sales tax, if you'll look, it was, or tax sales rather, was a $61,878.18, a total activity in 2019 of 36. There's no reported activity year to date, and then we have a budget amount of $1,000. So as we're walking down through these things, is there any questions regarding or comments, suggestions as far as line item reductions or eliminations?
When they sell property, money.
What that is it's a wash. It's really not a revenue for us because when they do the sale, then we get the money and then Shelba does us a letter as to how we've got it dispersed. And we get to keep very little of it.
So we're anticipating that there's $1,000 based upon the budget line item that you see, 2020 total budget, $1,000. Mike, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
but in regard to expenses, acknowledging that, second line would be part-time salaries, and we show 35,000 as far as a budgeted amount. If you look, historically, we haven't expensed anything now in 2020 that's recorded so far, nor in 18 or 19. So that's an amount, an allocation that we could consider as a reduction or a cut. I did some research in this a couple months ago, and cumulative, we have over $400,000 in part-time salaries that exist within the totality of county budget. And it's in various amounts in various different offices. And when I calculated it at just what an expense would be, it came to about $520,000. Now I'm just looking at stuff from trying to understand the impact. Well, if you just round it and say, okay, that's $500,000 in cumulative part-time salaries. And we do have a variety of positions that are funded at a part-time allocation, but cumulative wise, that's about 5 cents worth of total impact. I would say that it's probably appropriate. I will just use my office as an example. As everyone knows, there's one full-time position which carries all of the expenses of a full-time funded position, and then 2 other positions, one being Kay's, which is regarded as being a special projects coordinator, for lack of a better term. She just does a variety of different things, and she's been assisting and trying to help on this effort as well to do for you today. The other position supports the Commissioner's Court in its need for having a coordinator. And then the other part of it is to satisfy my responsibility as the probate judge for county probate court. So if we looked at that and divided it up, both of them come from backgrounds where they have any kind of full-time impact. Just in hospitalization alone, that's $9,050 a year, if I've calculated that correctly. So that's significant in the grand scheme of things if you're looking at the total cost of personnel in an office. You also would want to think about the context that personnel is the most expensive other than facilities that we have as far as in county government overhead. So the question is, because we've not had anything that we've drawn out of this particular line item in the last several years, apparently the monies that are in the different types of offices would be supporting of what their needs. When Donese and I visited, we talked about the value for the variety of different things that she's responsible for delivering, and how without part-time positions to supplement those and the various schedules, then she has a significant amount of savings that she's able to offer, but the workload, which varies during the course of the year, is addressed with part-time. So we have to be real sensitive on any of these categories where there are part-time, because they underwrite the existence of county government on a day-to-day basis. Okay, you can see the next couple of lines are expenses associated with that $35,000, which is Social Security, retirement, workman's compensation, and also unemployment insurance. So if you looked at a group, if I understand this correct, and I'm certainly requesting to be corrected if I'm not correct on that, that would be that group of the 35,000, the 2,678, 2,412, the 50,000, and the 16,200. So whatever the cumulative of that is, I think we're going to.
50,000 is for the workers' comp insurance in all the departments in general fund.
Okay, so we have a clarification on that. So Jackie, would it be fair to say that the Social Security and the retirement,
That does go with the 35,000.
as well as the unemployment insurance? Or is that separate?
That's a separate as well.
Okay, thank you. So the impact would be about $40,000 of reduction if we took out part-time salaries that apparently we're not using according to the information that's on here. But we are expensing out, for example, the $41,000 from 2018 on the unemployment, as well as the, workers' comp and then the unemployment insurance.
That part-time salaries, what is it originally was for is when they talked about having a floater, that it wouldn't be in anybody's department if they needed somebody to answer the phone, they had people out sick. That's what it was created for. But then when people started asking for part-time, we started figuring it in their budget because they needed them specifically for their office. So that's what that was about.
Okay, so there's a $40,000 reduction that we could take that we're not currently expensing, that we could absolutely cut from the budget to levy tax against the citizens for this next year. So there's $40,000. On the contingency for hospitalization, you can see where it's gone from 681 to 700,000. We're currently at 384,000. So if you just averaged it out or even went with the high, we could take a reduction possibly of 150,000 based upon 2019's activity. So there could be another 150 total activity of 700,000. So that is not for discussion. Comments?
100, and we did 700, 337, 72 in 2019. That would put us over.
At least the consent.
Cut it right to the wire.
If we go to 750, that was a reduction based upon what we have not expensed that out.
That's why it was put there, in case their budget wouldn't handle it. We have a contingency of line item to pay for it. I mean, that's what it was for.
So are we aware?
We're at the moment, of course, we did discuss in 2021.
So they end up with a lot of time at the end of the year on the books.
So would it be fair to say that $10,000?
A lot of time at the end of the year on the books.
So would it be fair to say that $10,000 would be at least? So can we reduce that? Stephen, Martin, are y'all following Do you want to weigh in on this?
I'm going to, yes, and you can also take money out of contingency for something like that. You just bring it to court and see what we can do there.
Well, do you want to move that money into contingency and do away with that line item?
No, let's just cut 10,000 and leave it in the line item.
I'm trying to figure out how to reduce this budget. Any disagreement to that? Maybe is a better way to ask it. Hearing none, then we have budgeted $50,000 for the postage meter. We have a high of $37,000 in 2019. We have budgeted. We've had, or when this document was produced, we've had about 22,000. Is a guesstimated amount, which we could reduce that by about $25,000 there.
Tangley was almost at
Sorry,
38,000.
Almost 40.
Yeah,
And
sorry.
April was 29,000.
So if we rounded it to the highest amount from 28, there has been, if it
Well,
round up
That
to
2020 year-to-date
$25,000.
is 6 months activity. That's
Okay.
what that is.
So that would be at $11,787. That would,
It just takes a lot of it, so there hasn't been any of
Yeah,
that.
we haven't had any.
I would not go below the 2018 number. I would go below 30,000.
okay,
It's a lot harder to add it back in later,
sure. Stephen, if we are suspecting that the 2019 amount is right at 38,000, would that be a place that we could take $12,000 off of that to reduce it?
I'd say 40, I'd say take 10 also. And like I say, it's always hard to come back up. It's always hard to increase it, but if you have a little flexibility in there, then, it's not a couple $1,000, so.
Okay, so we can save $10,000 then in that particular line item from taxation.
We don't have information of 2016, the presidential election is always going to be a bigger election.
I would also say that, the U.S. Post Office is in a lot of trouble right now, and so I anticipate increases next year in postage, so, that is something to consider.
We can do 10 altogether.
Yeah, 10.
Any disagreement with taking it from 50 to 40? Okay, soil and water conservation. It looks like that we're right on budget year after year after year. Stephen, you actually represent the county on that organization, don't you?
Yeah.
And this amount is just a historical supplement that we offer for them for just their underwriting of expenses that they do for the county. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. I'm not sure exactly where that $2,000 goes, but there's, matching funds that we disperse out into different projects that are going on in the county.
Okay, thank you. Steve, would you suggest that we leave it or change it?
I'd say just leave it as it is.
Okay, thank you.
That's a pretty, we hadn't spent any more or any less in the last 3 years. I'd say where it needs to be at.
Okay, thank you. All right. That's going to take us to the election expense. Denise and I had quite a discussion about this particular expense to the county, and because of all of the increase, you can see back in 2019, it was the total activity was $162,965, basically $163,000. We are budgeted for this year for next year, $108,660. It's an off year for election, but we're already at the halfway mark on the 2020. Denise, would it be fair to say that the $108,660 should address any concerns for 2021 that you anticipate?
That'll be fine for 2021. I mean, we're probably gonna go over for November, but we've got 5 other entities that's gonna be paying, reimbursing, which which saves the county money there, so.
Okay. So right now, as of, first 6 months, our total expense is 81,576. So that would be $160,000 that we might realize if we stay on that same track, given the November election.
Right.
Okay, I don't know how much the budgeted amount is for this year. Yeah,
It's 108,660.
thank you.
Are you talking about 2020?
Yeah, we got it. All right, we may have to make an adjustment in that as we realize the expense. Okay, so for next year, for 2021, if we have the 108,660, then do you believe that that will satisfy the 2021 needs?
2021, we should only have the constitutional amendment election.
Okay.
And, all the other school and city entities. So 2021 could go less, but then come 2022, we're gonna have to bump it back up to this amount.
Okay, so if we're just budgeting for 2021 and the potential real cost for the election, where would you tell us that we need to tax for that line item? What would be the figure?
Let me look at it. Let me crunch some numbers.
Okay. So we're gonna put a pause on that one right now. Contingency for miscellaneous. Here's where we talked about a little bit earlier. If you'll look, we hit the 2019 much deeper than what we had budgeted for. So we were over about $45,000 in that line item. And conversely, in 2018, we were about $51,000 shy of that. So year to date, we've got $12,000 worth of activity, and we have $401,000 in miscellaneous. It seems like, gentlemen, that that's an area where we can retain what we have and still possibly be stable. Any comments?
Sounds good to me.
Any disagreements?
Sounds okay.
Okay. Stephen and Martin, any thoughts?
I'm good. Good.
Okay. I'm going to make a recommendation on the Courthouse Historical Society based upon what the expenses of the last couple of years are and what I suspect it will be. They have requested that we retain their $3,000. I know that it's not a significant amount, but I would like to suggest that based upon the activity so far this year and then no expense in 2019, that we reduce it by $1,500. That in the event that they do go over the 15, then we can bring it before the court and possibly fund it out of contingency if there's a justification. So that's going to come as a recommendation from me, that we do a $1,500 reduction.
I'd say leave it where it's at.
Any other comments? Okay, we have one reducing and one retaining. We need some other comments from other members of the court, please.
I mean, what
What is it?
what is it?
It's kind of a petty cash account that they can pull in order to be able to do the activities that they do as a historical society that we are charging them to do.
I'd say
It's a de minimis amount, isn't it?
I'd say leave it alone.
Okay. Let's go to law enforcement liability insurance. Who can speak to that item for us, please?
Well, I guess that would be me. Yes.
Okay.
And as with any insurance, it depends on how much it's used as to what your premiums are gonna be year to year.
Looks like it's hovering around the low 20s.
It does.
I wouldn't go less than 24, 25. Cause I don't know what we're gonna get hit with next year, the way their renewals work.
24, 25.
25.
Okay, if we reduce it by 5,000,
Stephen, you good with that?
Yeah,
okay. Let's go to the East Texas Regional Water. We haven't expensed out anything. I'm not recalling the background on that. We have $300 in the account, but we haven't had anything this year or the 2 previous years. Any objections to cutting that? And in the request or a need that we can address it out of contingency? Any objections?
That's fine.
Okay.
All of
Stephen?
these,
yeah,
all of these entities that we give money to, I don't give it to them unless they request on their letterhead in writing. So when you see those that haven't gotten it, it's because they didn't send me a request for it. To me, I don't think we should just send it out. They should at least request on their letterhead.
Right.
And so those that haven't received it haven't requested it.
But we're gonna have to levy tax to collect it, even though we don't expense it out. So my concern for us right now is how much can we cut in taxation to eliminate, if we're not expensing it out, if they're not asking for it, we're still collecting it and having it sitting there even though it's not being expensed out. All right.
So all this
and
money,
just on that, on what you're talking about right there, is if a department has a full-time position and they're not filling that position as a full-time position, we as the government still have to tax the people for the full-time insurance on the hospitalization side. So if there's a department that historically is not filling that full-time position and just using part-time positions, we need to change that full-time position to a part-time position, so we'll quit taxing the people the $9,000 a year for their health insurance, which would go into that hospitalization side.
Agreed. I had not, I guess, probably thought of it in that context before, Stephen, but we budgeted for example, Jill's position. We budgeted for it for a full-time. Jill doesn't have to be full-time. She doesn't want to be full-time. She's fine, and she can be productive with the hours that she puts in and just on an hourly basis. So I understand and see. Now, in the event that we have positions like that, I think that in order to fill that position, should there become a vacancy, then we're going to have to come back and address that possibly during the course of the budget year. So to your point, if it's not currently and it's not anticipated that it would be needed, then certainly saving that $9,050 from the taxpayers having to just budget for it is points well taken.
Well, what it is that if they're not filling that position, and I don't want to talk about churches, but anybody, if they either need to change that to a part-time position, and if they do at the next time come back and ask for full-time, then there's going to be an increase to the overall budget, and they're going to have to ask for an increase on it. So, I mean, if they have a full-time position, they need to fill a full-time position or turn it on the books as a part-time position, because it's like I say, we're taxing the people for something we're not even using.
Got it.
It's not saving the people any money, we're just not spending that money.
Got it.
What about for the precinct?
But yeah, the insurance is paid out of you have a line item in your precinct that's paid out of the precinct. So the precinct, the road and bridge tax pays the road and bridge employees hospitalization. So that everything in road and bridge is not included in this hospitalization. So you can take in that side, if you turn it into a part-time position, you can roll that hospitalization into salary. And you just so everything in Road and Bridge is paid out of Road and Bridge tax, so you can adjust internally in there. So you're taxed the same amount of money, but you can take that hospitalization money and move it to salary.
For part-time.
For part-time, yes.
Yeah.
So if you ever go back to full-time, you just move that out of the part-time stuff and just adjust internally in your budget. Hospitalization for road and bridge departments are not paid out of the general fund. They are paid out of the road and bridge budgets themselves, which is the road and bridge tax. So
So back on the regional water, are we gonna leave it at 300 or just take it out?
Mike, we're not expensing it, so let's take it out. I mean, they're asking for it, but they're asking for us to raise taxes for it, then they're not asking for it. So let's go ahead and eliminate it. If we've got a history that we're not distributing it, that's an additional savings.
Yeah.
Okay, that takes us to foster child care, and we've had 5,000 in 2018, 10,000 in 2019, and we have budgeted this year for $5,000. Year to date, we have not. And
Okay, can I speak to that?
Yes.
I'm thinking the reason it's showing 10,000 and I couldn't look it up to be sure because Tyler Tech is down. I think in January, we had a lot of bills that we have to backdate to December because it was an actual December expense. And I think the request for it got backdated, so it didn't
Well, I can
show.
tell you why. We have so many children in foster care that we needed additional money. And remember, I came to the court and asked for money, and Judge Blanchett recommended we take 5,000 out of the child safety fund and move it into the foster care fund. So we moved 5,000 over from child safety.
Okay, well then, like I said, I couldn't even look it up to see what the deal was on
And
it.
I would say we have, yes,
Terry, what are the numbers of foster kids that we've had now as compared to 5 years ago? What's the number
we used
difference?
to have about 3 or 4 or 5. We now have about 60 kids in foster care from this county. And that number has not gone down in several years. It's between 50 and 60 children. So what we've had to do is cut back on some of what we do. We do school clothes, school allowances, school supplies, we send an allowance check, we send birthday money, but we had to kind of cut back on some of that. And we do raise additional funds, but we're not always assured of that money. So I would say we need, whether it's from child safety, which is fine, or wherever it comes from, that foster care money.
it needs to go up from.
So the need is increased like tenfold or more than what it was a few years
So,
ago.
for years, we only had 3, 4, 5 kids. I mean, we just did not have, and then meth came to Tyler County, and our numbers have exploded for years. So, and I know there's money in the child safety fund because we weren't able to do the work program. So, whatever y'all think, but my suggestion would be maybe move some of that money over into the foster care.
And well, I would suggest just funding some money in the general fund budget into that. Because you use the safety fund for other things too, correct?
Right, we do. I just know, I hate to cut back on what we do for our foster kids.
10,000 and supplement out of the child care fund. Is that what I hear you saying, Commissioner?
Now we have tenfold the number of foster kids that we're caring for in the county as compared to what it was years ago. And I don't know how long it's been since we've had an increase in this $5,000, but there are lots of foster kids out there, which is not a good thing, but we need to take care of our children in the county that are in foster care.
Okay.
Now, Stephen, I don't think I understood you. Did you say take it from the child safety fund, or you're saying take just?
No, just increase that 5,000 to 10,000 in the general fund where it's funded at in the budget.
Okay, so we're
needed more.
Yes, okay.
gonna have an increase
Of the account.
of tax money from 5 to 10 based upon this year's budget to next year's budget. And then whatever supplement above the 10,000, we will look at the child safety fund to supplement that. Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct.
Your recommendation? Okay,
Correct.
very good. Go down to RSVP. Oh, I'm sorry. Any additional comments, Mike, Buck, Martin?
Sounds good.
Okay. RSVP contribution, it's been $200 for years. Again, we're not expensing it. I would recommend at this time that we reduce that $200 there. Any objection?
So we'll just remove that line item?
Well, we just won't fund it. I think Jackie wants to keep the line item there.
Yeah.
I can just
Coincide
make
with
it
her numbers.
inactive, so then if they come back later and ask, we can reactivate it.
Okay, that's going to take us to the Tyler County Youth Programs. You know about that. You're aware of that. The $20,000 is what is in this year's budget. Year to date, we've expensed $6,000. The year previous, 14. Mike, I think that's a program dear to your heart. You want to?
Yes, sir, I would still like to keep it if we can. See, because I know that, that people just don't donate money to those organizations anymore. And kids from all over the county get to use it and enjoy it. So I'd like to leave it there if we can.
Comments? Objections? Okay, so leave the 20,000 in. That takes us to the RC&D. Stephen, are you also affiliated with RC&D? Or just the long leave?
Just a long leave.
Martin, do you have affiliation with the RC&D?
No, Rusty did, I don't know who took his place.
Okay. We haven't expensed anything this year. We didn't the year previous, that's $500. We did in 2018. Any objection to striking it? And as Jackie had suggested, just put it
Go ahead.
in. Okay.
What is the RC&D? I can't remember.
That's the Resource Conservation, and it's a regional, they call it Southeast Texas Regional Resource Conservation and Development thing. It's just a supplemental, obviously, contribution that's made from Commissioners Court historically.
It was used in 2018. That's the last thing.
Wasn't that right?
Probably because Rusty's not.
Probably
there.
because Rusty's not here anymore. Okay.
I think they gave some scholarships and things like that money in the past.
Any objections to reducing it and classifying it as an inactive line?
Could we check into it? I mean, I'd hate to take it away
Okay.
associated with it. I don't know. I mean, I thought we might just look at it and see before we take it out.
But who would you contact? I don't even know who to contact. I guess I can. Do what?
It's probably a scholarship or something that they've given because it's a $500 line.
Or a membership fee.
Yeah, or a
Probably
membership. We may
I
not
think
be
they
members.
used it at one time, if I recall, they just used it to supplement their operating costs.
So we're probably not able to operate anymore.
Okay, so Mike, you want to check into it and then,
I'd like to before we get distracted. No more money.
all right. It takes us to the Texas Game Wardens. We haven't been expensing that out. It's a de minimis amount of $1,000. If we had something that was petitioned and requested, then we could look at it under contingency versus adding that additional $1,000 to taxation. Any objection to just approaching it that way, since we don't have any activity this year or the 2 previous years, rather than levying tax on it?
Sounds good.
Okay?
Yeah.
Any
We have
objection?
membership in the office.
Say that again?
We are furnishing them an office space.
Okay.
We used to not do that.
Stephen, any comments?
They're good for that.
Okay. That's going to take us down to the Appraisal District. We did get a budget in from them, and our portion is $382,700 for next year. That is going to be an increase, but we did realize a rebate back because when they calculated our expenses, they were not going to have as much of an overhead cost this year. And so we were going to realize, and I'm sorry, I don't think I have that document in front of me right now that shows how much that is, but
$376,000.
That's what was budgeted. He's talking about the new budget they proposed.
the new budget is going to be $100 because we're at a 38.27% percentage of entities overhead. So I would tell you they are requesting from us $382,700, but they did not expense out in this current budget that entire amount from for this year. So we're receiving a rebate back. I think that we have to plan and budget for what they're requesting. If we realize,
Are we required by law to budget that 38, whatever percent, is that statutory?
I don't know that answer, Stephen. It would certainly seem that that is an obligation or a liability that we definitely have to plan based upon what they tell us
Right.
that our share or our portion will be.
Judge, the way it used to be,
Yeah, I think
the county could
we should
project.
budget for that.
Hey, Stephen.
I think we should budget for them. Yes.
Okay, Donnice has some historical information. She, let me see if she's loud enough where you can hear.
But it had to be a certain percentage of all the entities that rejected it before they had to go back and redo their budget and submit it again.
Did you hear that, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand, but maybe break it down to somebody that's not real smart, like me.
They submit a budget, and the entities have to approve that budget. If they disapprove, then they have to go back and re-budget, do whatever they have to do. So, but the way they do it is pretty much just split it up according to the
Percentage.
expenses that are incurred and the population or each entity. So I think we need to go ahead and budget it.
Yeah, I think for the amount that they ask.
Mike and I and Lynette are on that board. We're pretty good.
I think budget for what they ask for.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the 382,700. Okay, housing.
That's gonna be an increase.
Yes,
Yeah,
it would
it'll be
be.
an increase.
From
That's
the-
what's going on down there. I don't doubt it.
If you'll observe on the 2019 activity, it showed a 383,559 budgeted amount. I'm sorry, real expense. And so far this year, we're at 289,034. We're budgeting for this year, 376,500. So can we agree that we're not going to protest what they have recommended as their budget, but we will just be supportive of what their request is?
Yes, and we'll need to increase that budget, by what, $6,100 or so.
6,137, you're exactly correct, Steve.
Yes, sir. I'm good with that.
Martin,
Yes, good.
Buck, and Mike?
Yes, good.
Okay,
And that was it, right?
so that takes us to the housing of the Tyler County inmates. Gentlemen, look, if you will, We realized in 2019, almost $44,000. We're budgeted this year for 300,000. We've already had 128. We're looking at $100,000 increase from 2018 to 2019 actual. So, Stephen, can you or Mike give the rest of us any insight that you may have regarding those expenses?
Well, I would think, they're not holding, they're releasing whatever they can right now because of COVID and all of that. So I would suggest we leave it where it's at. We just don't, it's probably gonna ramp back up once they get COVID's over with, once the election comes around or whatever it is. I'd be afraid to cut it that much, so.
Okay, so the 300,000 that we have budgeted for this year, carry that over to next year, 2021?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Any disagreement? Okay, that takes us down to the travel. We have budgeted $10,000. We have a historical high of the last 3 years at 2019 of 3,700. I'm going to recommend that we cut it in half to 5,000.
I'm good with that.
I'm good too.
Okay. Public officials liability coverage, if you'll look again, 2018, 2019, we're budgeting for 2020 at 26,000. Jackie, are you anticipating any increase in that liability?
No.
Okay. So we could shave off potentially $4,000 off of that and take us down to 22,000. That would be my recommendation, gentlemen. Any objection?
No.
I don't have any problem, you cut the whole thing for that, sir.
And just,
That's all we need.
and just
So you're leaving.
Wonder why?
okay.
22.
Takes us down to Tyler County Nutrition Services. We've had we've had a consistency of $15,000 in that particular account year to date. We're at half of that. Commissioner, would you speak to that for the court, please?
That's the money that they use for the meals. That goes to East Texas Support Services. And that's what it costs, 15,000 pretty much. But they're not operating right now.
Is it because of COVID?
Excuse me?
Is it because of COVID?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how they're gonna recover from it, but they will probably need the money in the near future, especially that they may go to more of a Meals on Wheels type deal. But I think it's worthwhile. We probably just need to leave it in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave it there.
Okay. We have a budgeted amount this year of $100 for the Kirby Memorial maintenance and repairs. Can someone speak to that? I just don't have any knowledge about that.
I'm not sure.
What's that Kirby Memorial?
That was Randy's deal.
Was that the church out at Captain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably. so.
Stephen, do you know about this? The Kirby Memorial maintenance?
No.
Program?
I think that's probably.
No, I know the county owns the property, but I don't know anything about any maintenance and repairs.
Okay.
You couldn't do much maintenance and repair for $100.
I was gonna say, they're not doing much.
Any objection to striking that? Hearing none, we'll strike that $100 on that line item. And Jackie, I guess that's another one we'll just render as inactive. That's going to take us to the county telephones. I don't have a lot of understanding about this. We're budgeting it for $50,000. We've got $34,000 in 2019, basically $8,000 in 2018, and then year to date would be $16,700. That would be almost $33,000 for activity of this year, but we've got it budgeted for $50,000. If someone can speak to that and help.
That's all the office phones. is what that is. And the reason it was so much higher in 2018 is when we converted from landline to the internet kind. And we had to purchase the equipment.
So what would be for county telephone line item expense? How much should we budget for next year?
40?
35,000, 40.
35, I think, would be all right.
35. See where it goes if we have to make any adjustments we can.
Okay,
35.
that's gonna take us to advertising. I think that's, we just have to have that. Isn't that right, Jackie?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I'm not gonna say no question is dumb if you feel like you need to ask it, but I wanna understand this correctly. All this we're trimming off, it goes away completely? The bill will not be taxed for that amount?
That's
To
correct.
supply that amount?
Correct.
All right, so
We're cutting taxes right now, is what we're doing, by reducing budget.
by reducing the amount of money we need to bring in, but that money just goes away, right?
It's gonna,
Technically,
it's going to affect the number that she needs to calculate to tell us what our new rate of taxation will be. She's just looking for the number. We're trying to get to that number.
and then this, and I'm gonna go, where was that up here that I was looking at? Like this contingency or miscellaneous, if we end up having to come back and get some of this, we're gonna take it out of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, okay. Just trying
Okay.
to understand it.
All right.
I mean, I just.
So any objections to leaving the $5,000 for advertising?
No.
Okay. That's going to take us to legal fees. Gentlemen, I'm going to recommend that we cut that in half. We have not expensed any more than $66,000 in 2019 and $27,000 in 2018. We're currently this year's activity at 67. If we stay on track, and that, I don't know that we will or won't, but to budget for next year, we have budgeted this year, we've raised $200,000. So we'll have enough to get us through this year. But for next year, if we realize a $100,000 reduction, that would be my recommendation.
Well, now that 67,000 is just a 6-month time period.
I understand, but we've budgeted $200,000 in this year. We've raised $200,000 in taxes to pay for that for this year. Next year, if we budget $100,000, then we're reducing that in half. So that would be my recommendation. We should be good for the rest of this year, Jackie, at the 67,000 for the first 6 months.
And the only thing that would just be some kind of an incident, correct? That would cause it to be.
If I recall, Joe Smith had asked us for that years ago in anticipation of some capital murder cases that he was anticipating that we might possibly have to supplement. We have had those, but I'm just looking at these numbers. I don't know what the vendor accounts are. I haven't studied any of those to see where they're actually falling. Is it part of trials that are taking place upstairs? I can't say that I know that. I'm just trying to.
Trials and anything that the court orders that we don't have budgeted.
Like
Whether
court-appointed attorneys?
Yeah, it's court-appointed attorneys, and if they want like a psychological evaluation, or they want we have witnesses and we have to house the witnesses. It's meals for them. Now, most of that we get reimbursed for witnesses, but that's the kind of stuff that comes out of it.
But the
I mean,
court-
We had that $200,000 in there because of the capital
Right,
murder
and the district court does, but this is for above and beyond what's typical.
To keep
I'm good with cutting it in half.
pay Lucas might, somebody from.
Are we paying Eric out of that?
Might need.
Yes.
Because it's like insurance. If you get a capital murder case, instead of the county having to put the whole
I
bill.
think that's a separate account.
Okay.
I'm thinking that's the,
And this also.
you're talking about the capital murder
I love the next.
liability. I'm not about that. It's based out of Lubbock, serves the entire state of Texas, and we're a part of the pool. And so we appeal to, I don't think this is it. I'm not 100% confident, but I don't think this is it.
But we also pay.
Yeah, I think that's the penalty stuff, Judge,
Yes,
on capital when they're going after the death penalty.
right.
Right. So cut it to 100, is that what you're saying?
Well, that was my suggestion, but I think our discussion here, if we cut it to by 75,000 to 125, that may would address what we're averaging this year right now as a more,
Yeah, I think good with that.
reduce it by 75, Stephen?
Yes,
Okay, so leave it at 125 for next
Okay.
year,
correct.
okay? Any objection? All right. Now, that takes us to autopsies. Gentlemen, there's a lot of requirements by the JPs pertaining to these inquests. And as I understand it, there is a lot more stringent requirements about when autopsies must be versus a discretionary call by the JP. I think that we are realizing, if you look back at 2019 and 2018, we're at 67,500 in 18, 68,2 in 19. We've had so far this year, the 11,675, but we've had a very interrupted year in a variety of areas in that first 6 months. I don't think that we would hurt ourselves or the citizens if we left it maybe at 70 and just cut it by $5,000. But I would be appreciative of any additional input to understand this from any of you. Okay, I'll recommend we cut it by 5,000.
Have they gone up on their autopsy fee?
There is, yes,
They-
there is that as well.
I'd be concerned about that going up on the fees.
So my recommendation is to cut it 5,000 and go to 70, but if there's another recommendation out there, I would appreciate hearing it.
I'd say leave it alone.
Any
I'd say
objection,
leave it alone.
comment from,
I would leave it alone as well,
okay,
2021 could be an interesting year.
okay. That's a consensus then, is to leave it at 75. Thank you. Let's move down to judicial education. 17 back in 2018, 1,100. My judicial,
I believe, but Jackie, let me understand, but, okay, so there is a fee that my office collects for out of every probate and civil case, and it's for judges and clerks to go to the probate academy and that sort of thing. And so I think this was put in as an expense item for that fee that we collect, is that correct?
It's like you're using most of it.
there's one per year that is paid by,
Pays my full expenses.
Okay.
And they usually send half of the employees. And I think they pay half of one out of y'all's also.
any objection to leaving it to? Hearing none, we'll move on to our Alan Shivers Library. Gentlemen, this is an area that we've been doing a lot of understanding. As you know, Mrs. Bunch passed away several weeks ago. There is a reorganizational type of process that's ongoing. Commissioner Nash and I represent the county on the governing board. The city is a contributor with 2 representatives, as is the school district. The governing board met week before last, named an interim, but yet we don't know exactly what kind of an impact all of the reorganization is going to be. I am not in favor of or recommending any increase into that for this next year because of the potential restructuring of the leadership and the directorship of that entity. And I would say that we've got some significant more work that we're going to need to do to educate ourselves and understand exactly what our responsibility is. And it's just been continuously interrupted over time. I would say that's what they are accustomed to receiving from the county going into next year because we have so many unknowns. The governing board had decided that we would try to shoot for January 1st for a new director to be on board, possibly hire them maybe a month or two ahead of time, let them go through a transitionary period if they need to, and then ultimately wind up operating off of the new budget. I would say or recommend to you that we keep it as is at this time. Any objection? Hearing none, we'll leave the 127.7 in place and move down to our association dues. Looks like that's probably stable as is. Any objection to leaving it as is?
We'll leave it.
Okay. Burke Center, we don't have an option on that, gentlemen. It's the set amount. I'm not aware that they're making an adjustment into their budget for 2021. And since we have the current amount of 17,912, I say that we do with it exactly what we're doing with our
The library.
appraisal district. We leave it as is. Any objection? That amount actually is figured by the number of residents in Tyler County over the, I think it's 5 or 7 county group of counties that Burke Center provides for. Okay, Highway Coalition, we put in 7 last year for this year's budget. We haven't had any activity for a couple of years. Are you still a part of that, or is Stephen, or who is?
I'm not.
Okay,
But what, then, say it again,
it's the Highway Coalition.
no, we've had no activity there. They're getting
Okay. Any objection to cutting that 7,000?
I do.
Okay. Then we will reduce that by 7,000. Our audit is at 45,000. We've gone from 38 to 26. Activity this year so far is 41 almost, and we've got budgeted for 45.
Or leave it where it is.
Okay. All right. That's going to take us to juvenile detention services at $10,000 is what has been requested for this year's budget. Can you speak to that, Terry?
Yes, sir. We actually, have spent this year $7,070. I don't see where it says that we've spent that, but we also get reimbursed the debt con money. We try to use that money for instead of county money when we can. So that may be why we've spent $7,000, but it could have been, we try to say,
I'll have to get with Kathy because she may be coding it to something. Obviously,
I'm
she's coding
thinking
it
it's
to
probably the
something.
reimbursement back to local money that we're using, but,
Is that debt con money?
yes, because it goes
Yeah.
back into just our local budget.
Right.
But we have spent $7,070. this year, so.
So I need to move
So
that,
you need that money though, to
Yes.
spend it, to get it reimbursed, you still need that money.
I understand the point about cutting taxes. And so we'll try to be very careful with that, but safety, of course, always comes first. So decisions are not made on dollars, they're made on safety. But if we can figure out a way to spend it a different way than the county's money, we do. And I'd hate to see that money go away in case we have to have it, so.
I said we leave it there.
Okay. There's a request for no change. Any
No
objection?
objection here.
Okay, thank you. Martin? Okay, it seems to be a consensus of no objection. That takes us to our legislative services. Next year is going to be a year that will look a little different, possibly, depending upon the impact of COVID. We had participated in previous years with the DETCOG group of counties to underwrite a legislative reception in the hopes of garnering some favor with our legislators at the beginning of the session. We have $100 appropriated for that. I say we strike that at this point. If it looks like it's something that we need to go back and revisit, we haven't expensed anything for a couple of years now. Any comments? Any objection to striking the 100 for next year's budget? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Garth House item, and that's a $5,000 amount. You can see that in 28 we expensed that. 2019 there does not show to be any activity, nor for 2020 at this point. We've budgeted it for $5,000, but nothing year to date. So the question would be, is that an area that we can cut taxes in as well?
You know, we use the Garth House a lot. Don, where you sit down there in the corner, they do all of our forensic interviews. Now, they have budgets from other places. I'm very surprised they haven't requested that money. But
usually they do,
yeah,
but I don't know why they haven't. I don't know if they got a new person or.
maybe so, I don't know, but we use them a whole lot more than $5,000, that's for sure.
Okay. So is there a recommendation?
I'd like to leave it.
Okay, there's a recommendation to leave it. Any objection? Okay. General liability, you can see it went from $5,800 to $61,000. We have it budgeted this year for $15,000. Is there any reason to fund it for $15,000 for next year?
Can we go 7,500, still be covered, cut it down?
Can we go 6,500?
Shoot, it is.
Do I hear 64? Comments from anyone, please?
7,500, that's good.
Okay,
75 or 65?
Cut it in half to 75.
Cut it in half.
okay. Any objections at 7,500? Hearing none, we'll move on to the rental tower. Donald is present with us. I think several of you have worked on this as well. We have budgeted $4,000 for this year. We have a transition from the sale of the Bergman Tower. We've made those adjustments internally. We've gone to our own tower. So we should be able to eliminate a significant amount of previous budgeted needs in that particular area. We've had the expense this year that's gone in excess of our budget by $1,516. In contrast to the year previous of 2019, it was a little bit low. Donald, just because you're here, can I call upon you to help the court understand anything?
Yeah. We initially were paying I think $4,000 a year on the Bergman Tower, and then that's when they wanted to increase it to 12, it increased 3% every year. So we moved equipment to reduce that tower that we own, the county owns it outright, so we don't have to pay any rent. And there's a generator on it, so we're completely off of the Bergman Tower, and we've done, I don't know if we turn that maybe into like a maintenance or,
I was gonna say, we need to have something budgeted for repairs, right?
yes, like a tower fund, the hole goes out on our tower.
That, change that.
Is it a fair question to say 4,000 could possibly address an average cost of maintaining the tower during the course of a year?
Depends on the weather, huh?
Yeah.
Well, with that generator, I mean, is it where somebody goes and checks it when they check the one at the sheriff's
I
office?
believe Ken Jones
Can I know that?
is, I think he's got a company come by and
Oh,
check.
okay.
It all varies. It could vary whether depending on what happens, and if you need to do a bulb, you know, there's, I think we've paid a couple thousand for that one tower fund.
Okay.
You don't climb it?
No,
Contingency fund for the things that are unknown to us that we can go and supplement if we have to.
So
So,
what do we
We're
do?
gonna change the name of it to maintenance and repair of the radio tower.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can,
Lower it to what?
or leave it at 4,000.
Oh, okay.
You wanna change it to radio tower
Maintenance,
maintenance?
yeah.
And repair, yeah.
okay, that takes us to the rural fire protection. 2 years ago, we expensed 5,250. Last year, 5,100. So far this year, 3,150. I think that is a set amount that we distributed. We distribute to specific fire
And
departments,
it's the only one, it's the one that don't have an ESD.
which is, there's 2 of those, Chester and
Shady
Whittle.
Grove.
Shady Grove,
Shady Grove,
Shady Grove.
Shady Grove is now under an ESD support.
We have
Shady Grove.
Chester.
Shady Grove outside the ESD.
They are, but I think, Stephen, they're getting their supplemental division from the ESD. They share it between Whitetail Ridge and Shady Grove. That's my understanding.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
true.
there has to be a contract, I think, with the ESD and them. The Shady Grove is not in the ESD. I live in the same area they do.
But my understanding is they have contracted with Shady Grove. They distribute them a portion of their tax collection as well as Whitetail Ridge.
That's correct, but Shady Grove is not in the ESD. They don't collect ESD.
Okay.
They have a contract, I don't know what the contract is, but they're not in the ESD.
we should be all right with what we have at budget, correct?
We should, Mike, because I think that's an obligation.
And it's a set amount, it never changes.
Okay.
So just gonna leave it.
All right, our bonds are at 15,000 this year. We have expensed out 4,200 so far. Is 15,000 adequate for next year? Somebody who has some knowledge on that can speak to it.
Well, because,
We'll have several bonds.
Next year,
yeah, we, and some of it, because when we had talked last year, we had talked about moving everybody's bond out of their budget to this one line item. And some of them did get moved and some of it didn't. So I don't know, you know, I would say, because it's every other election cycle, it's gonna be less than, it's not gonna be the same every year, so.
like all the officials will be getting bonds, so I mean, that 4,000 is gonna go up.
Yeah.
But then next year, we won't
So-
do that.
I mean, you could lower it to 10 and we could see how it goes. I mean,
Just kind of every other year, we'll have to add it back.
Yeah.
All right.
Every other year, so
So Jackie's recommendation for Martin and Stephen is 10,000. So savings of 5,000 in that area on line item. Any objection?
I'm good with that.
Good.
Okay, so we'll reduce it to 10,000. That takes us to the sheriff vehicle liability. Again, if you just look at the average, if we reduced it down to 37,000, which is the average, not the average, that's just a mean between the 2018 and 2019, that would be a $4,000 savings. Any reason
I would say not lower, and I'm gonna tell you why, because we've had a lot of crashes this year. So it's probably gonna go up. We've hit a lot of deers and we've rolled some vehicles, so,
So is it your recommendation to leave it at 41,000?
yeah, or at least 40, because I look for it to go up.
Okay. She's recommending at least 40, Stephen and Martin.
I say go for it.
Go for it,
I'm good.
40,000?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll reduce it by 1,000. All right. That'll take us over to miscellaneous expense. Looks like, again, historically, 31,000 in 18, almost 9,000 in 19. We have 22, almost 23,000 this year so far, and we have budgeted for this budget 68,000. Is it reasonable to believe that maybe 34,000, just by cutting it in half, could be a compromised amount based upon 2 years' known expenses? Any objection?
That sounds okay.
So we're gonna cut this one in half and go to 34,000. Any objection? Okay, I need some help in understanding the expense of the payment in lieu of taxes. I understand the payment in lieu of taxes, but I don't know if I'm understanding it as an expense. Is it because the other entities are requesting from that revenue line?
Okay, when we get the PILT money, we get a large amount and a small amount. And the small amount is divided among the school districts. But we haven't received any money this last year or this year yet for the school districts. We've just received the one large payment. So that's what that's for. So when we have to pay this, like, because Sparger and Warren have big thicket in their school district. And I got the breakdown from the appraisal district of what percentage. I think Woodville has a little piece. And that's what that's for. But
Okay.
it's not a guarantee because it depends on if we get the smaller amount from the PILT money.
Is this a realistic amount that we need to tax in order to fund for it?
I would say so, because I have no way of knowing what they're gonna send.
Okay, so just additional lesson, Jackie. The PILT money, which is payment in lieu of taxes, comes from the federal government. It comes down to us as the receiving entity. Lands and assets that are in the federal government's control that are in Tyler County is what the PILT money is distributed for us to receive because we don't tax against that. So we're the primary recipient of the PILT money. Then we redistribute it to the school districts that are also sharing that same property within their district guideline parameters. Am I right so far?
But we get two amounts. The larger amount stays with the county, and the smaller amount is divided by the school, to the school district.
Okay,
But there's no guarantee of that school district money coming. I don't know what their formula is. I don't know how they determine what the county gets or what it doesn't. But that's the way it's been done, is that we give the schools the lesser amount based on their percentage of big thicket on the tax rolls, because I got
Okay.
that from the appraisal district.
so would it be pass-through money, Jackie? Okay, so it wouldn't really be an expense that we would have to raise taxes to pay out, would it?
Mhm.
Okay, so
But you
if,
still have to have an expense line item to expense it out that has a budget.
but if we're levying tax of $8,000 on something that's pass-through money, it's gonna be handled in a different distribution method, wouldn't
Well, I mean, it comes in, we send it out,
it? Okay,
but we still have to have a budget for it.
but do we have to levy tax for that budget for it?
Well, I mean, it's the same way with the sheriff's sales tax. That money comes in and it's distributed out based on what Shelba tells us it's got to be. So if you want to take it out of Commissioner's Court appropriations and move it somewhere else, you can do that, but you still have to have a budget. I hear what you're saying, are we levying a tax? But you still have to have a budget, whether you're levying the tax or not for that.
Would you recommend that we could move it to where it would be more accurately realized as far as it coming in and going out, as opposed to an
Well, you
expense?
have a revenue line item in general fund that says payment in lieu of taxes. On the first page, you've got payment in lieu of
Yeah,
taxes.
it's fourth or fifth item down.
So I have to have a line item to expense it out of, and it's not anybody's specific department. That's why it's up in Commissioner's Court Appropriations. I mean, there's some things that you have to budget for, even though it's a pass-through, you have to have a budget for it.
But can it be zero?
But then you're showing you're going over your budget.
Is there a difference?
I mean, because we're gonna show it coming in revenue. When we were on a cash basis, you shouldn't have, but you could receipt money to an expense line item. But when all the Gadsby reporting stuff came into being, a revenue has to be a revenue, an expense has to be an expense. So even though I may be getting the 8,000 in the revenue, I've got to have it in the budget as an expense somewhere to balance that budget.
So would you
Because 8
recommend
comes in, 8 goes out.
would you recommend just leaving it as is, as opposed to?
I would say you could lower it to probably 3,000 because it hasn't been very high.
It's like 11,000 in there.
That was us getting caught up from some previous times that the letter wasn't making it to me.
Said, Jackie, if I'm asking it correctly, is 8,000 as an expense can be reduced to 3,000, and we'll realize a $5,000 gain on the revenue side of it.
Mhm.
Okay, so your recommendation is 3,000 would be appropriate.
I would say so, because like I said, we didn't get it last year for them.
I like that recommendation. I'm gonna support that. I'm not gonna object to that, gentlemen. Okay?
I'm good.
All right, let's do one more before we take a break, and that's the payment to the states, to the state. And I have no understanding or knowledge of what that means.
That is the fees that are collected that I have to report to the state, that I have to send to the state cost reports
Okay,
that I get from the JPs, the county clerk, the district clerk. I have to fill out that form and then send what the state says we have to send them. And so that's the line item that I have budgeted for that. And that's the state cost money going back to the state.
that's a moving target for you. You don't really know how to have any kind of a hard number, true?
True.
So it's another pass-through amount?
Not,
Would it be fair?
well,
Because
like,
we're collecting it on the
okay,
revenue
you
side.
have a revenue, like Donice may be collecting a fee that is $6. Well, we get to keep 10 cents of that $6. And then the other amount has to go to the state.
Okay.
So there again, you have to have a budget. Do I know how much each office is gonna collect? I don't, so I have to do my best forecast. And I'm gonna tell you, 60,000 has been running pretty much true. We're a lot less this year because of COVID. People aren't working, they're not
Yeah.
getting paid, they can't pay their fines to get their fees distributed.
So are you recommending just leaving it as is? Okay. All right. That's the recommendation. Any objection? All right. Gentlemen, I think that we have taken a significant activity of looking at this. I would make a recommendation for us to, it's 11:30 now, is to break. Let's digest the impact of what these cuts may possibly look like. Jackie, you've got your numbers. I've got my numbers. I'd like to do some calculating and figure out exactly what we've realized from the work this morning, and reconvene at 10 o'clock tomorrow see what the total impact of that would be. This is gonna give Lynette somewhat of a feel of what that hard number is based upon the cuts that we made today. So she can start at least her first portion of the numbers, and then we can go into anything else past that. For example, the departments and the offices and the funds. The offices, departments, and the funds. Any objection to that recommendation?
Good, do they need that long of a time to go through, or can we reconvene later on this evening?
It was just a recommendation, Stephen. If there's another offer on the table, please support. That was just my thought. I guess I've got some stuff going on that I've got to take care of, and I was thinking I could squeeze that in this afternoon, but I'll be here for whatever you need me to be.
Well, I don't know if we need to wait till 10 o'clock tomorrow. I don't know why we need to wait that long. Yeah, they need that long on period, so.
That's fine. Is there a recommendation?
I would say earlier in the morning, 8:30 or so.
Okay,
That's okay.
so if we recess until 8:30, is that correct?
It needs to be.
Hey.
9 o'clock, everybody ain't an early riser like you, Stephen.
What time did you say?
10 tomorrow, just reconvene at 10.
Yeah.
As long as we stay within a 24-hour period, we don't have to repose.
Right.
And that was the thought.
Is that 24 hours from when you recess, or 24 hours from when you start?
It's 24 hours from when we recess.
Okay.
So we have a couple of options. What's the pleasure of the court, please?
Let's go with 9.
Donnie's is crying, I mean,
Oh,
we
she's
can't
still
do
about to
that.
I'm good with 10.
I'm good with anything, it don't make me no difference.
Martin?
It keeps it the same, mine doesn't have to go back and forth.
So,
10 o'clock it is.
all right. Stephen, would you make that in the form of a recommendation?
Yes, 10 a.m. Tuesday morning.
Okay, so we're going to be in recess. We have a motion to be in recess for budget workshop until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And provided everything stays as is, then we will reconvene in here. Is there a second? Second? All in favor, aye? Okay, we'll stand in recess for budget workshop until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned.
I knew she was keeping a running total, she knows already.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Good.